These are the words which I spoke to you 2 years ago. Because two and a half years ago, we were supposed to be in this room. And we ended up in a virtual gathering. It was our first virtual gathering. And we had 2 more. And that first virtual gathering actually was quite successful. We never had so many people attending our gathering. Now, it's great to see you all here. And the Corona days, yeah, are we at the end of it? Who knows? One of our speakers is not here, one of our keynote speakers, because he's suffering from COVID. He will be dialing in. He will be online with us. So also this event is going to be hybrid. Terrible word, by the way. And yeah, Corona. Are we in an interbellum? Are we at the end? Who knows? But it's good to see that we're all able to meet again and to be here face to face. And I hope you're enjoying the event, you're enjoying Rome as well. Yeah, my name is Paul Slot, and I'm the chairman of ETIS. And yeah, welcoming you all to this great event. And it's good to see that more than 200, I think about 220 people are here today live, and there are even more than 100 people also registered for the online participation. So again, a good participation for this event. And as ETIS, we are doing quite well. And did you know that more than 3,000 people attended our live streaming events over the last year? There was twice as much as the year before. That's amazing. Representing 28 different telcos, also that's good to see. More than 100 workgroup sessions took place the last year. So quite successful. And I can only say one thing, as ETIS, we are alive and we found our way to deal with the Corona times. And a special welcome also for our new partners, Fastweb and NBI. Welcome. And a big thank you to our supporting partners who are also making our ETIS gatherings possible, like Searset, Aria Systems and WIS. And I do have to mention 4 of them, because they are the supporters of this event. And they are Aria, WIS, CFM and Volks. So thank you a lot for making this event here today possible for us. And it's also my pleasure to announce that ETIS has claimed the title of a European telco ISAC, an information sharing and analysis center. An important thing, because through that, joining the European network of ISACs, and more precisely, it's for the ETIS Information Security Working Group and the SOC working groups, they offer a safe space for telecom operators to share experience and share knowledge, and to provide a safe digital channel for in-person meetings. And it's great to be able to see that we have been qualified as an ISAC. And both of these 2 working groups react to the trends in security, they're also here today, and produce benchmarks and similar deliverables. So quite happy as ETIS to see that we are nominated as an ISAC. Yeah, dear telco friends, the world is on fire. And are we getting out of a Corona crisis, or are we still in it? But there's also a climate crisis, and we spoke about this several times. And there's a clear role for the telco industry in this climate crisis. Not only in terms of energy saving or switching away from fossil fuel, but also to facilitate the transition needed. Just think of the possibility of smart energy systems. But the world, Europe in particular, is also hit by a war. Our thoughts are with the people in Ukraine. And I realize that for several of you, the war is at your border. You will have colleagues, friends, family members who are impacted by the war. And I was talking to one of you, and this colleague, mentioned to me that a significant part of his team was actually gone back to Ukraine to help in the war for freedom. So that makes you realize the real impact of this war. And as an industry, we are doing what we can. We are supporting the government decisions to limit Russia press, as an example. Albeit that this raises another discussion about the role of the telco and free press. We also made free roaming possible. And many of you are supporting the Ukrainian people with specific aid. And there's a thin line between governmental responsibility and the companies, our own responsibility. And we cannot always hide behind regulation. We have to make up our minds on how to deal with the epidemic, on how to deal with climate change, on how to deal with world peace. We all have a responsibility as a person, as a husband, as a partner, as a parent, a manager, a friend, a director, as a member of a company, as a member of society. It's our duty and responsibility to define how the great technologies we work with, 5G, IoT, AI, next-gen networks, big data, name it, how these technologies create tomorrow's solutions for today's problems. And we can claim, and we should claim, and we are, that we are the backbone of society, but that claim comes with a huge responsibility. And today we are here to discuss the future. And we have some great keynotes. They're here waiting for you. And they're all focused on the 10 strategic themes we discussed last year, as the themes we defined as critical for us as an industry. And with the main question, how the innovation of ecosystems can be driven by us, we will discuss this morning with the speakers a couple of things. And it's my honor to be able to welcome the speakers. Amy Cameron, who will take us to 2032, I believe. And Mike Pinder, who will define the relation between our challenges and the Sustainable Development Goals. Roman Friedrich, who will explain how we as telcos can change the game for climate transformation. And Brechtje Sporenberg, who will share her and KPN's story on becoming an industry leader in sustainability. And Henry Corpy, I think he will also be online from Elisa, will talk about transformation and actually the relation between sustainability and digitalization. I wish you all a great conference. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. How are you? Good, good. Okay, still waking up. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Wim and to all of ETIS for welcoming me here. Excellent, that's working. So for those of you who don't know STL Partners, we are a research and consulting firm. I'm on the research side of the firm based in London, and we're primarily focused on growth in the telecoms industry. So what are the new opportunities and new business models that telecoms operators can implement, apply, use in order to grow their businesses? So what I'm looking at today is sort of telecoms on the brink of a big opportunity for change and what we think that change should look like. So to give you an idea, I'm going to start with, when we mean on the brink, what we're talking about is that essentially the telecoms industry is at an inflection point, right? Everyone has a choice. Do you want to become a national leader for sustainable growth in your local economies? Or do you want to continue doing mostly what you do now, which is connectivity, which is increasingly competitive and commoditized market? So it's about that choice. And do you want to play something more than what you are, or growing the new stuff that you are doing? And if you're going to, what is it going to take to do that? So I'm going to kick off by introducing the coordination age, which is the framework within which we are thinking of all of our research. Some of you may have seen it before, so I won't dwell on it too long. And then we'll go into how telcos must adapt their businesses. So in 2018, we came up with this idea of the coordination age, which is a new era for connecting technologies. And if we dial back to when the telecoms industry was founded, it was really about faster remote communications, and the whole industry was set up around that. The business model, was selling voice and text on a subscription and per unit basis. Then in the 90s came the information age, which was really about universal access to information, right? So the revolutionizing of IT. We could find all kinds of information at our fingertips. There was so much of it, and we saw the emergence of new business models, particularly around B2B2C platforms and the freemium model. Where we are now is in the coordination age, and this is really the universal need is no longer to have that information, but for that information and those insights to deliver an outcome. And that is primarily around a resource outcome, right? How can we be more efficient? How can we be safer? How can we be more productive? How can we make better use of our raw materials? How can we reduce our carbon footprint? All of those things are what consumers and enterprises want. They don't want the information. They want to know what to do with it. And so that is our job as the telecoms industry, to figure out how we can serve that. And the existing business models around B2B2C platforms will stay, but we might see some more decentralization emerge, as we have, for example, with edge computing. And the final point here is that COVID-19 has already accelerated this change. And apologies, I can see that my beautiful STL colors are not turning up as planned. So on the take-home presentation, you'll see my full color scheme here. But anyway, now looking out ahead to 2032, there are some big things that we're going to have to contend with. Paul already told us about many of them, right? A very large population of humans, climate change and sustainability, in geo and ideopolitics, where we have competing ideologies and cultures, and recovering from COVID. And that means that we have some key actions we need to take. We need to think about how we can make enough with what we have. Energy management, waste management, healthcare. We have to think about how and where we'll live. So be prepared for some mass migrations. People who might be displaced. Security, staying safe. Obviously, this has to do with the war in Ukraine as well, and regionalization. With different ideologies, and how do we manage that? How do we cooperate when we see the world differently from our neighbors, from our peers? And then finally, making things work when we can't. So we know that we can't always be there for everything. The world is getting more complex. So how can we automate things that we can't do in order to work in a faster-paced economy? So when we think about how the world is responding to this and putting this into context, there are different responses at different stages. So if we think about recognition as the beginning, and you may think, okay, so, oh, something's happening, and what are the risks and threats that I'm seeing, and what should I do about it? I don't know. And what is my mindset? Well, I'm not sure, because I don't know what's happening. And you kind of, as you get to know something, you then realize what's going on, you can qualify it, you can understand what the impact is going to be, how you should react, and you get to normalization, where you think, okay, I understand what's going on. Now let's put some things into context. COVID, it may not be over, but we understand more or less how to deal with it. Society is functioning despite this big disruption that we had. The war in Ukraine, but a little bit less certain. It's underway. We kind of see what's going on. Right now, it's smaller than COVID. We don't know. It could get bigger. But where we're at now, we're reasonably clear on the situation that's happening. Something else like Taiwan, that's really, we don't know what could happen. It's very early days, but something might. But putting this into context, everything is small compared to climate change. Climate change is huge. It is disruptive. It is changing everything that the way we do, everything. Every way that every company, individual lives, operates, must change. And so I think that's why obviously it's a big part of the discussion today. So I'm not going to dwell on it, except to say that, I really wish that my colors came through, because no one can read this right now. But the point is that we have the coordination is no longer a nice to have, it is a must have. And that's because there are two major changes. One is COVID-19, which is driving massive automation, and is telling us that, okay, the world is not as stable as we thought it was, and we need to change, but we can change. And the other is the impact of climate change, and that is we need to be more sustainable in everything that we do, and we need to figure out how to do this. And so the coordination age is a must-have, and the consequence is that we need to revise our business purposes around meeting this need. And so what we think is that to revise the business purposes, telecoms operators, as well as everybody else, but we're talking about telecoms operators, need to rethink what their purpose is in society. So if we think about the information age, where the societal aims were really growth at any cost, and telecoms operators' aims were, let's connect some phones and sell some data. What we need going forward, oh, I'm so glad this one is turning up, is the societal aims are, sustainable growth. And telecom's purpose should be to connect technologies in a way that can make the world run better. You should be looking at what's this outcome that you can deliver to your customers. So that's the framework within which we're doing our research, and I hope you find it compelling. So, okay, you must change your purpose to do something else. What does this look like in practice? We all know that telecoms operators have limited resources and they have to think carefully about how they invest those. You know, just this morning I was having a conversation with somebody about security and how it's a difficult case for the CIO to make the case for investing more in certain types of security. So we know that that's the world that you're operating in, right? So what we need to do is think about, when you're expanding into enablement platforms or solutions, is taking a vertical strategy. We know that if you're going to deliver an outcome to your customers beyond pure connectivity, you need to really understand their pain points. You need to understand who are the stakeholders who are involved in solving these pain points. And so for that, you need some specific skills and relationships to deliver unique and tailored solutions. You can't do it for every industry. Now we think, and probably this resonates with you guys, is that the sweet spot for operators is, you know, to play in national economies of scale. You know, many operators have tried the cloud business. It is very difficult to compete in a global economy of scale. That is not where your strength is. You know, don't do that. Focus on where you're strong, right? And so if we think about where telecoms operators are strong, there's kind of, we're looking at this matrix here where we have the level, the economies of scale, is it global or national? And then the degree to which connected technologies can change the industry. And we've plotted a few industries here, and what you can see, this one, where the degree to which connected technologies can help is high, and where the economies of scale are national is telecoms operators' sweet spot. You know, so healthcare, renewable energy, transport, logistics, banking, and we've seen some telcos get some success in those areas, but there's a lot more opportunity. So once you've picked your vertical strategy, figured out where you're going to play, the next question is thinking about what are you going to do. So thinking about the revenue and profit pool, how this might break down, we break it into 3 layers. So at the bottom we've got network as a service, consolidated, large telcos, intense competition, and capturing the smallest part of the value chain. Next up you have application enablement, right? So you get a little bit more of the value in application enablement. But again, it's consolidated, large tech players, intense competition, and it tends to be more global. So in national scale, telcos may be able to compete, so it's a medium fit with your current skills. The solutions and applications are obviously where the biggest revenue driver is, but it's fragmented, it's specialist, there is still intense competition, and because you have to develop those skills and specialization, which is different than telco's historical business models, it's difficult and it's going to take time. It's not an easy win, but it is where the biggest opportunity is. So to boil this down, you basically have a choice, right? You can stay on the network as a service side, and you know, where your ability to compete is high and be cautious, but risk being squeezed out by market decline, or you can try and be ambitious, and the main risk there is the implementation failure. And so that's why it's really important, you know, we keep saying it again and again, build that vertical expertise, build that learning, do it incrementally, stay committed so that you can learn how to implement successfully. And I think we'll have a few examples of that throughout the conference this week, or this 2 days. So we've done a lot of research in business models, and we really believe that a marketplace approach can help telcos to play more effectively up the value chain. So we've already had this discussion around, you know, the vertical challenge, or, you know, the need to move into vertical opportunities. Next up, we know that this has typically been difficult for telecoms operators to compete here, right? And that's because there's a desire for proven ROI in their investments. And it's difficult to prove an ROI when you're solving a problem that hasn't been solved yet. There's a walled garden mentality where operators want to own that customer. They're investing in innovation in order to build their core connectivity revenues. And they therefore create a walled garden, and they limit the number of people that they get into their ecosystem, and that limits their ability to monetize. And so this is what we're talking about with a cost-plus model. It's looking at, you know, what is the cost of offering advanced messaging, you know, like RCS. Let's do that and charge a little bit more. And the reality is, no, let's make the technology work, offer it, and think about how we can build on that economy of scale afterwards. You know, how can we build something new and innovative on top of that once we have people bought into our ecosystem? Obviously, that requires a lot of investment. And so what we're thinking is that, potentially telcos can join marketplaces in order to capture those economies of scale. And I think that one of the things that telcos have done a lot is partnerships with companies in order to bring new services to market. And that's great, but the reality is that every partnership is bespoke. You have to negotiate the commercials, you have to negotiate the technology integration, and that makes it long to do, and it makes it difficult to replicate. By thinking from a marketplace perspective, you standardize this, and that makes it easier for people to work with you and easier for you to work with people. You don't have to negotiate the commercials every single time. You don't have to negotiate the technology every single time. And obviously, you're trading off a little bit of the ownership of that customer, but maybe it's worth it in the end because you access a new customer that you didn't have before. So thinking about what you might do in a marketplace, there are different areas that you could play. So there's a telco as a supplier. So the telco uses the marketplace to sell its own products and services, leverages it to sell end-to-end solutions, or just to deliver a little piece of the connectivity within a much larger ecosystem. There's a telco as an enabler, and that may be where you bring your other assets to bear, all the know your customer stuff, where you can be playing a role in identity and authentication. Why limit that to your customer base when you could be doing it for, or why limit it to the services only that you offer when you could be offering authentication for your customer base for a wider range of services within a marketplace? That does require some investment in digital capabilities. Lastly, there's the telco as an orchestrator, and I think that this is where you really need deep business expertise. This is where you need deep vertical expertise, and I think lots of telcos want to play as an orchestrator because then they own that customer relationship. And not a couple of weeks ago, I was at another conference, and there was a North American telco talking about its private network solution, and it was like, we want our logo on the front of every deal that we have. And sure, that's great, it's good for your logo, but if that's your requirement for every deal that you make, how many are you cutting yourself off from because you can't get that? Is there actually anything wrong with playing in an ecosystem where you don't own the customer, but you get revenue that you wouldn't otherwise have gotten? It's a mentality change, and sure, if you have invested for a decade in healthcare like TELUS has or like KPN has, maybe you can play the orchestrator role. But that is not the position a lot of telecoms operators are in. So why not be an enabler? Why not play as the supplier in somebody else's ecosystem? So those are the roles you can play. Now, if you're going to play a new role, it doesn't come for free. Even if you're going to be a supplier, even if you're just going to be, if you're going to be an enabler, you can't do that for free. So how do you make the investment case for that? How do you reorganize your business to do that? And this is where we start getting into the business model that telecoms operators have. So we've done some comparing of global tech companies against telecoms operators as a basis for comparison, and it is quite stark. It really puts things into perspective, and I think valuable for rethinking where we are as an industry. So at the bottom, we have CapEx as a percentage of revenue, and then on the y-axis, we have R&D as a percentage of revenue. So on the bottom right, where you have high CapEx and low R&D, you're a moat builder. You're investing in spectrum, you're investing in networks as a way to keep high barriers around your business, make it difficult for others to play in your market. On the opposite end, where you have high R&D and low CapEx, you're a service differentiator, right? So you're really investing in the best technology, you're really staying ahead of the game, and you don't need to worry about a CapEx because your technology is so advanced that people need it. In the bottom left, where you have low CapEx as a proportion of revenue as well as low R&D, either you're a struggling company because you can't invest, or you are in nirvana because you are making loads of money without trying that hard, or without needing to make huge investments as a proportion of revenue. The last one is you're a service differentiator, where you're very advanced on technology development, but you are also building a moat. You are also differentiating where you are. Broadly speaking, telcos are in this bottom right category, no surprise, and tech players are in those top categories. So the telecoms industry is investing more and more capital infrastructure, which is yielding lower and lower returns. And this is where we really put it into context. So this is when we first made this chart in 2017. We compared the revenues on the left-hand side, we're missing a little, on the left-hand bars are revenues, and the right-hand bars is market capitalization. So what you can see is we had 165 telcos compared to 7 internet giants. And the telecoms industry revenues just under 2 billion, but market capitalization much lower. And the internet giants revenue much lower, but quite similar market capitalization in 2017. Fast forward to now, where we're looking at revenue from 2020 and market capitalization in 2022, where the telecoms industry's revenues, they've dropped a little bit, and that might be because the number of telcos we're looking at is 78 instead of 165, but those remaining 90 telecoms operators are making much smaller revenue compared to the largest 78. So they have an effect. It's not just because of those missing telcos that the revenue pool has gone down. But if you look at the internet giants, their revenue has gone up significantly, and they're now about on par where telecoms operators were in 2017, and their market capitalization has skyrocketed. Okay, look, in the last couple of months, that market cap might have come down a little bit. It's still very high, though. And I think that this demonstrates what we were arguing at the time, is that service differentiation plus a moat means that investors believe that the tech giants are going to bring a better return on their investment, that they are going to deliver greater revenue growth in the future. And here they have, right? So telecoms operators have to figure out how they can deliver that value, or they're going to continue to get squeezed. So what we think needs to happen, and what has started to happen but needs to accelerate, is a change in the operating model, right? Where you use AI and automation to drive efficiency, to free up money to invest in new skills, assets, and capabilities, and also to improve your profitability. We're seeing some of that happen now, but it needs to accelerate. But I think what we also need to see is CFOs drive that shift, right? And ultimately, CFOs are the ones that hold the purse strings. If they don't change the budgeting cycle, they don't think of how CapEx is spent, 5 years from now. If they're not planning ahead for those 5 years from now, then telcos will be in a further situation like this, right? And so, for example, we've got on the bottom right what the telco trajectory could look like over a period of 10 years. And on the top left, actually, we've got Google. And what we don't have is from sort of 2009 to 2018, it increased its CapEx. And now it is decreasing its CapEx to move towards nirvana. And that's easier to do when you have revenue growth. So telcos have to be more strict about how they're doing it in order to free up that revenue for innovation. So I think besides sort of changing the way money is invested, there are a few other fundamentals that we think that telcos need in order to deliver on this vision. One is a compelling vision, something that your customers, your stakeholders, your investors can believe in that is going to deliver revenue growth. What is the story you are telling them that is going to convince them, that is going to get them excited? Ecosystem readiness. So again, automation, willingness to play in standardized ecosystems. How do you make yourself easier to work with as a partner? Sustainable operations and services, because if you're not demonstrating that you are being sustainable, that you are helping society to meet this biggest challenge that we have, then you will lose the faith of your customers. And finally, and I think, probably the most important, is being a learning telco. None of us know what is ahead of us. All we know is that it's going to change. And so the best thing that we can do is know how to change. So I think with that, I'll sort of give you my final conclusion, which is that if telcos can leverage automation and a change in how they allocate budgets to change their cost stack, which I wish the bars were turning up properly, but again, the takeaway presentation will look nicer, then they may be able to also diversify their revenue stack. And I think the important takeaway here is that telcos play very little in B2B to X at the moment, but they have really strong customer relationships that they can leverage in order to play effectively in ecosystems and do more in B2B to X. And so we think that that is where a lot of the new revenue can come from. So with that, I hope that was a good setting for the day, and I will pass on to our next speaker. Thank you so much, Wim, for having me.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Okay, and welcome everybody also on behalf of the ETIS Central Office, Michel, Andrea, Dominique and myself, Wim. Welcome you to Rome. Benvenuti a Roma, la città eterna. So you will see more of it this evening. Just building on Amy's presentation, I think there are a lot of challenges and fortunately also a lot of opportunities ahead of the telco sector. And ecosystem innovation and sustainability are the topic of this gathering. So we will dive deeper into it, and we are very happy that we have Mike Pinder now as the next speaker, who will give his view on the methodology we should use. Like Amy has said, we have a huge challenge to go into ecosystem innovation. It's far easier said than done, but perhaps we have to take a wider lens also in order to make sure that we grasp the opportunity. So Mike, thanks for being here. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Nice to be here. Thank you so much to ETIS and the team for inviting me to Rome. It's obviously a beautiful city. It's wonderful to be able to do these events again. So big welcome from me. Okay, so we're going to look at moving beyond customer-centric innovation and how we would enable ecosystems as a result of it. So we're going to dive into some more of the how and the whys. 15 years ago, I never would have imagined that customer-centric innovation would be tasked with saving the world, but that's the odd situation that we find ourselves in today. And I'm going to take you on a little journey to explore how we got there and potentially what to do about it moving forwards. When I grew up, I was given these magazines called How and Why. It's really framed how I think about the world. I'm sure they were given to parents to stop their children from asking annoying why questions to their parents the whole time, but it was something that very much formed what I do and how I think. So I'm going to bring some of that thinking to you. And this is the type of thinking we do at Explorer Labs, where we're helping large organizations become sustainable business innovators. So helping them with strategy through capabilities and impact support. And we're lucky enough to do this built on experience with some of the world's largest organizations, helping them through those processes. And we'll dive into some of these things now. So looking at customer centricity, how did we actually get to customer centricity? Well, it's nothing new, as you're probably all aware. It's been around since the 1960s. It's taken on various different names over the years. You may be familiar with things like design thinking, obviously agile development, a big part in telco, lean startup more recently. But now we're sort of in this new phase. What is this new phase? It's arguably the ecosystems age. We've gone through the distribution, the information, the customer age, and we're sort of emerging into this ecosystems thinking now. A lot of this has come from this book called Change by Design by Tim Brown back in 2009. This little diagram has a lot to answer for. It's the reason why we have customer-centric innovation, which we'll build upon. But it's about starting with the desirability, then figuring out the business case, and then figuring out the feasibility in that order. And that has some pluses and minuses. Since then, this kind of thinking has gone stratospheric. There's over 500,000 hits just on this diagram alone on Google, but it has some severe limitations in our thinking, which we'll dive into shortly. But as you know, this is nothing new. This is about trying to map customer needs closely to what the business is trying to do and closing the gap between these two ideals, if you like. So the logic that underpins innovation practice is about always starting with the customer, then figuring out the business case, and then figuring out the technical stuff at the end of it. That's how customer-centric innovation works, but this is severely limiting what we can actually achieve. It's all about trying to avoid this, so trying to avoid building something that nobody wants. This has been the case for so long, deploying all these resources and not actually creating something that anybody wants at the end of it. The customer-centric thinking went stratospheric back in 2014 with this little chart that showed that customer-centric firms outperform those that aren't customer-centric by 228%. And that suddenly catches the attention of all the board members. Funding's released automatically, and the rest is history. Design thinking in particular was the framework with its deep phases on customer empathy as the dominant methodology to adopt. And then soon followed hundreds of variations of playbooks and toolbox and corporate training programs, workplace redesigns, all the rest of it. So at this point, the whole process goes everywhere, and you've probably seen a load of these lying around in your own workplaces. And then, yeah, we have workshops galore, a lot of post-it theatre, potentially. I've been responsible for some of this, having trained over 2,000 people over the last 10 years. But in that time, I've noticed where the limitations are and what we can potentially do about them. The other interesting thing is that we have this idea that if we start with customer centricity, we can magically transform an entire organization in 5 easy stages. And this is the dominant logic that's even pushed out today. I pulled this up 6 weeks ago from Salesforce on Forbes. It just shows how prolific this thinking is, that, you know, start with customers, everything else will be fine. It's not really the case, as we shall see. So why did this happen? Let's go a little bit deeper and try and understand what's actually going on here, where what we're trying to do is manage this process. This is the fuzzy front end, we call the process, what the innovation or business design process feels like. We're trying to manage all this uncertainty. So we're trying to get away from this, which is building something over a long period of time, releasing it later on, and then only getting validation to realize that nobody wants it. So what we've done is we've built these methodologies to break up risk and uncertainty into small, manageable chunks so we can kill projects quickly, we can reassign resources if we need to, but that's essentially what the process is doing. When we map this across the standard innovation process, there are methodologies to enable us to know. It's a knowledge generation process. And then we have these methodologies neatly mapped across the whole process. And it's quite an achievement that we've got to. It's taken us 60 years to get to this point, but it's designed for a specific customer-centric purpose. So what's the problem then? I hear you all asking me. The problem is that this has limitations that I've hinted at. The methods tend to focus on individuals and small groups of people, okay? Small groups of problem owners. This means that they fail to account for broader stakeholder perspectives, which means that they fail to address complex issues, wicked problems, systemic challenges, as we've seen in the first presentation, and they tend to generate solutions on the limitations on what we already know. So we need to overcome these barriers. On the problem side, on the problem fit, the knowledge really comes from existing customer experiences, so their existing frames of reference, and trying to understand that through these customer-centric methods. This has limitations. On the solution fit side, the knowledge typically comes from the team members themselves. It's limited by what the team members in the workshops actually know and can bring to the session. So how do we actually overcome that limitation? This can also lead to incrementalism, yeah, we want to obviously get away from that. We want solutions that are far away from home that can tackle big, radical, systemic issues. So what we have is a knowledge constraint issue. We have a tight coupling of our understanding of problems and their potential solutions, and we're in this sort of vicious cycle that we need to broaden out and come to better solutions. It's like looking for your keys under a streetlight. You're only going to look for what you can see in your immediate environment. It's very hard to see what's beyond. And so the approaches I'm going to share with you are about how to actually go beyond these limitations. What are the painful outcomes for you? How are you actually going to feel these pains? It can result in incremental innovation despite what you're intending to do. The solutions can be too close to your mothership, not getting far enough away from where you are already. The wider systemic challenges are out of reach using these methods. Growth opportunities are simply left on the table as a result. There can be a mismatch between your stakeholder preferences and what your organization is actually capable of delivering. And your innovation can soon be perceived as theatre productions, as we saw in the black and white slide earlier, which can lead to a loss of appetite for future innovation, which means, ironically, that your company is more open to disruption, which is obviously not what the game is all about. Everyone loves a good Ford and Jobs quote whenever talking about innovation, so here's one that everyone knows about, asking about faster horses. So he was saying that everybody wanted, if we asked everybody what they wanted, they would ask for faster horses. But what was he actually saying there? What is he really saying? He's saying that we need to broaden our stocks of knowledge and then seek the right solutions. I'm not asking customers for their solutions, but trying to understand their problems better. So it's a backward-thinking approach. On Steve Jobs' side, he was a visionary person. So he was saying, you have to trust in the dots that there will somehow connect in your future. He was alluding to something in the future and working back to it. So he was asking us to expand our future near possible knowledge and then map those back to what we know as the problems now. So it's a dual-angled approach. So looking at the bigger and broader issues, we have these things called wicked problems. So these have specific characteristics, that there's no right solution, that interventions can have very serious unintended consequences. There are many different stakeholder perspectives. Problems may never be solved completely. The list goes on. They're very severe challenges. Basically, the problems are much more complex to understand. But these are the key characteristics to consider. This is what it feels like, right? It's a big pile of spaghetti. That neat little fuzzy squiggle now becomes a vastly complex mess to try and sort out. So the fuzzy is now even fuzzier. When we look at the types of problems that we can solve with these approaches, from low stakeholders to high complexity, the customer-centric tools and methods that we have so far are designed for the tame problems. They're not designed to help us get to the wicked problems. This is the limitation that we're facing. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. If you've seen Apollo 13, it's just not going to work. We're trying to bodge our approach to doing that. So this is why these methodologies are tasked with doing something they're just not designed to do. Everyone's aware of what these sustainability goals are, but really what they are is a list of wicked problems for us to solve. There are 17 of them that I'm sure you're all aware. These are the ones that are mostly related to the telco industry, and this afternoon we're going to be working on these specific ones in the workshop, so look forward to that for those who are joining. And then how do we actually tackle these problems? How do we tackle these end targets with these approaches? Well, firstly, it starts from shifting our approach from shareholder value to the idea of stakeholder value. There are lots of different stakeholders that are involved in the process. There's social and environmental and economic considerations within that, but the sphere of complexity is changing and getting more complicated. We need to broaden our logic for innovation. So instead of starting with customer desirability, we need to think about the people on a social desirability level. We need to understand the planetary level issues from the environmental perspectives. So we need to broaden how we start the innovation process, not just thinking about the profit and the technology side of things. We need to understand that we need to create value beyond the business needs. There are all sorts of different value types from the people side, the planet side, the profit side, the progress side. We need to broaden our understanding of what kinds of value can we actually create and integrate into our processes. So if we're looking at the limitations of the customer-centric approaches that I mentioned earlier, let's start to look at some possible ways forward. One approach is to go beyond the limitations of design thinking, which is focusing on these customer-centric problems, but looking at systemic design, systems thinking, understanding complex systems of interaction as the starting point for the innovation process. Here's an example of what a basic systems map looks like. So you have the scope of the boundary of your system. You then have specific variables within your system. They're not stakeholders, but they're variables. You look at what are the interactions between these variables, what is influencing what, where are the causal loops happening, and then where can we highlight areas for future change. So you're managing massive complexity. And here's an example of the COVID-19 systems map. But once you start to map out all the interactions, you can see across the system where the specific points of leverage can be, and then designing interventions to address those specific areas to influence systemic change. Looking at how we upgrade the empathy phase, this is about mapping and understanding the system level of what's happening, designing a future state and agreeing on what that is, making specific interventions to get to that future state, and then implementing transitions to enable you to get there. This is what the Fordian approach is about, understanding the problem space much better, broadening that understanding. We have the approaches already to do that. When we look at the methods to looking at the problems and the limitations of what's already known, we want to broaden our understanding of what the potential solution space can look like. This is where things like speculative design, future-back thinking, and deep tech acceleration techniques become very useful. They broaden our stocks of knowledge about the problem space. It gets us away from the limitations of traditional workshop settings. So we're feeding in other sources of knowledge at the same time as we're expanding our areas on the solutions side before going to market fit and scaling. This is what a deep tech acceleration model looks like. This is basically what Steve Jobs does in his mind, but it's mapped as a systematic process. You start with the scientific discovery. You map the different value types from the different technology readiness levels. Then you understand what the stakeholder needs are at those different levels, and then do rapid experimentation along that process to find where the future back opportunities are by broadening out that problem space area. We're pioneering these approaches in an academic research center across industry and academia at Imperial College Business School with Royal College of Art. where we're developing digital methodologies for these. So if you want to dive into more details in this, check out wickedacceleration.org, where we're really pioneering these approaches to attacking these elements from the solution side. So finally then, what are the next steps for you? What should I make you take away from this session today? It's about upgrading our approaches to tackle these ecosystem level challenges. So what are the better ways to address wicked problems? Well, we have these new methodologies to expand our understanding of the early stage of the process. We can augment what we've already built upon. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to add in the right methodologies at the right time. So adding in ecosystem strategy formation processes, adding in speculative design, systemic thinking. We can upgrade the processes. Then we have an end-to-end set of methodologies that can actually address the problems that we're facing moving forwards. So it's within reach. Now, if there's one slide I would love you to take your cameras out and take a picture of, it will be this one that we're building up to, because this gives you the big picture of how this all fits together. So you're starting with your ecosystem strategy. Here's roughly what you do in that stage. Then looking at mapping your systems, understanding the dynamics, what's going on, how can we intervene, what are the consequences. Then mapping that into design thinking. That becomes a complementary process to what you probably already have developed in-house already. Adding in speculative design, future-back thinking on the solution side, and then moving forward into implementation side with lean startup, business model innovation, and agile development. And it's a lot of information, but this is what an integrated innovation process looks like that can actually start to solve some of the biggest challenges of our time. So it is within reach, so I'm hoping that this inspires you moving forwards, that we need to adapt our approaches subtly but significantly in order to tackle the challenges we're actually facing. So this afternoon we're going to be diving into this part of it. We're not going to do all of it, so those that are joining, get ready for doing some of this. And we'll be diving into a case study with World Economic Forum on their approach to enabling circular economy, and we'll be running a workshop along those lines as well. So looking forward to joining those who will be joining that one this afternoon. That's it from me, but thank you very much for listening. This is the other slide you might want to take a picture of. But I very much look forward to having conversations with you over the next few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Looking forward to the workshop as well. As I've mentioned, sustainability and ecosystem innovation are key to this conference, and we will focus now a bit on the sustainability aspect of it. And we're very happy to have Roman amongst us. Roman, unfortunately, is infected with COVID, and although he's not that ill, he didn't want the risk to affect or infect us. So he will give the presentation remotely. And he will explain that on one side, the telcos are part of the carbon emission problem, but we can be a huge part of the solution as well. So Roman, I hope you can hear me, and I hope we have the connection up and running.
I can hear you. I can see you. Can you hear me as well?
We can hear you. We don't see you yet.
Okay. Can you see my
We see your slides. That's a good start, and I think the
okay.
AV people will make sure we also see the video. Yeah, probably you have to change the view because we see your next slide.
You see my next slide?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see what I can do about that one. Do you see the first slide now?
Yeah, that's better, thanks.
Very good. Okay, now I've moved forward. So, okay, you don't see me still, or I just get going, right?
Yeah, you can go on.
So first of all, my apologies. As Wim said before, I got infected by Corona. I would have loved to be in Rome this year, although to have many conversations with you. I wanted to be on the safe side and not risk your health. Hence, I decided to stay at home. Yeah, as Wim said, I would like to talk about how the telco sector can change the game for climate transformation. There is a lot of buzz around sustainability in the telecom industry for good reason. And I want to explain why, because we have a significant footprint, actually, emission footprint, waste footprint as well, but focus today is on the emission side. And that is important to manage, but at the same time, there are opportunities for us in the telecom industry, which we should embrace and which we have to embrace. There's actually even expectation on us as a telco ICT industry that we do our homework. And that will be a bit of focus for today. Tomorrow, I have a bit of more details how that can be accomplished. So first of all, I would like to start by saying our footprint, our emission footprint in the industry is quite significant, as you can see on the left-hand side. I've deliberately here captured ICT footprint, not telco, because many incumbents do offer digital solutions, digital services, and that is more ICT, and not clear telco anymore. But the important message remains the same. These are figures on the left-hand side that you see for the year 2019. In 2019, the ICT footprint, emission footprint, greenhouse gas emission footprint, those CO2 equivalents, has already been larger than of the airline industry. Has already been, because in the meantime, airline industry emissions have not gone up. Ours have gone up dramatically, given the fact that we are transporting much more data in our industry as a corona impact anyway, but in general, an expectation that we're going to have an exponential growth of data transport. As you can see on the right-hand side, so if you basically take the current numbers and do assume there is business as usual, which there won't be, hopefully, there will be an enormous increase in terms of emission in the telco sector, in the ICT sector, an increase that for sure will not go through without notice. Regulators will realize that the telco industry, despite all the nice digital impact we have, is a major culprit, so to say, when it comes to global emissions. So those numbers alone indicate there is a need for action, for sure. The way how to think about it, and now it's getting a bit technical, and Wim reminded me yesterday I need to explain those scope definitions. So the way to think about this is in what we call the different scopes of emissions. The UN and SBTi, Science-Based Target Initiative, has agreed to really classify it according to Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. So Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are basically those that are directly controllable via companies. They're direct emissions from sources that are owned by the company, or indirect emissions from the energy you purchase, electricity basically, or heat even. So these are important emissions. However, much more important are those emissions that are created as a result of your value chain involvement. We call them downstream and upstream emissions. When you buy a product to realize, for example, network, when you buy a fiber line, this fiber line has been produced and has also created emissions. And when the fiber line is used later, or a mobile device is used later on, it also produces emissions, because there's a usage situation, which has also a tremendous emission footprint. As a matter of fact, I show you on the next page, the Scope 3 emissions in our industry are really significant. So that is what we call our own footprint, Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. That is important to think about and to understand, to baseline and to work on. However, there's another scope, sometimes referred to as Scope 4. It's not an official definition, Scope 4, but it's very often used. And we call that customer enablement. It's basically those emissions that can be influenced by the use of digital solutions. And it has proven to be quite relevant, actually. And I show you later in numbers. And that is a full scope to think about when we talk about the footprint in the telecom industry. First, our own emissions, directly controllable, then within our value chain, Scope 3, and then later on, the enabled emissions with other companies. And that is really what I believe is the fun part when we talk about sustainability in our industry. Here are a couple of more data. Looks now busy, but I hope I can explain it very quickly. On the left-hand side, you do see, again, Scope 1 and Scope 2, that the typical telecom operator, like anyone you find in Europe or US or Asia, a typical integrated operator with retail operations and with network operations. And you see here, 75% of the emissions are in Scope 3, which is quite remarkable and quite important to realize, because it means these are emissions you cannot control directly. you have to go to your suppliers, or you have to select your suppliers in the way that they are reducing the emissions. That's something we don't do. And when you dig deeper into scope 3 emissions, you see here on the right-hand side, there are 15 categories in total behind scope 3, and the most important ones are typically the use of sold products. That's basically the use of our services or products, devices, routers that we might sell in the telecom industry. And in addition, the purchased goods and services. That's the upstream part basically of the supply chain. And obviously, there is a need to really think about all categories, but these are the big levers that you can influence when you want to reduce your emission footprint. So that's important to take into account. Now, having said this, the telecom industry is working on that. What you see here is a bit difficult to read, but I hope I can explain it very easily. You see here the different commitments in the year 2015-17 on the left-hand side, then in 18-19, and then in 2020 and going on. And what you can see here when you look at the different players, and I've just selected a couple of players that have increased ambitions over time. What you can see is that there's a race, I call it, to net zero targets. Take, for example, Telia, just to take one, started with scope 1 and scope 2 targets in 2015. And by now, or 18, and by now, there is a commitment to be net zero in scope 1 and scope 2 already 2 years ago, and for scope 3 in 2030. And that is true for almost any telco that has put sustainability and climate and sustainability on top of the agenda. There's a race for net zero targets, which is nice to see because it means CEOs are taking that very seriously. The big question mark is, of course, how do we get there? Because as I tried to explain on the page before, we have the majority of our emissions outside our direct value chain, but we can influence directly. So we need to get a grip on what we buy in the telecom industry and what we sell in the telecom industry. Otherwise, we can never meet the scope 3 net zero target in 2030. And that's the major effort right now. The telecom industry is focusing on how to really get the supply chain under control. But I don't want to dwell too much on that today. I will cover that a bit more tomorrow. Today, I want to highlight the fact that there is this scope 4, which we call customer enablement. So first of all, we have to realize that our energy hunger will continue to increase simply because of the fact that we are digitizing the world, we are transporting more data. That means we are consuming more energy. The type of energy is, of course, debatable. We can use renewable energy. However, there's not so much renewable energy right now available that we can use only renewable energies, but nevertheless, that would be an important lever, of course, to have an impact on the emissions. However, that on the right-hand side is an important part. The ICT industry could enable a 15% reduction in emissions by 2030 in different verticals that you can see here. And there is more detail behind the verticals. Basically, it's always the same principle. You basically reduce the energy consumption or resource consumption, I should say in general, in your cooperations in different verticals. The Paris Climate Deal has actually stated explicitly in 2015 that without that impact of the ICT industry, we won't be able to meet our near-term 1.5 degrees Celsius target and emission slope until 2030, unless we really use digital solutions, digital services to abate emissions in other industries. There's a lot of buzz around this. You can see here a couple of quotes from the GSMA, from Ericsson, Mission Innovation. It's always about avoided emissions. Now, one word about this scope 4 definition. No, it's not a definition actually, or the scope 4 use here. SBTi, Science-Based Target Initiative, has not accepted scope 4 emissions, customer enablement emission reductions as a way to abate your own emissions, because there would be a lot of double counting, as you can imagine, because it's the direct responsibility of the target customer, the enabled customer, basically, to reduce emissions. But it is accepted that this has a major impact, but it doesn't really contribute to an SBTi certificate, so to say. Now, here a nice illustration in my eyes, which really illustrates how important actually it is for the ICT and the telecom industry to customer enablement and scope 4 emissions. I said at the beginning, we have a significant footprint in the ICT industry. No doubt, we have a significant footprint, larger than of the airline industry. So it has to be tackled, it has to be worked on. However, we have the chance to surpass by far our own footprint by enabling emission reductions. And that's the green slice at the top of this bar here. That is actually our mission in the ICT industry. And that's what I'm working on a lot. And I would encourage every telco to really embrace that, because you can immediately also realize there's a lot of value behind that. And I'm coming to the value levers in a second. So I have translated this number into something that's probably, hopefully a bit more tangible. I've tried to calculate the value of 1 ton of CO2 reduction through customer enablement. And there are 3 ways to think about it, as you can see here, and I call that the customer enablement win-win-win opportunity. So the first impact that we have when we reduce the emissions with a customer, with a vertical, is that there is cost savings down here for this customer, because there's less energy cost or resource cost, and in those regimes where we have carbon taxes, there's carbon tax avoidance. Number 1. There is, secondly, for those customers that are more sustainable, they have a positive impact on their market positioning. They win market share typically over their competitors. They can realize a premium. They can attract more customers. There is this impact in terms of $380 for enabled revenues for those customers. And last but not least, there is this impact for ICT players who offers a service. They can sell those services for premium very often, and they can generate $170 approximately for 1 ton of carbon reduction. So actually, it's win-win-win for everyone, right? For the customers of our customers, for the ICT players, and for the customers directly in terms of really cost savings. Now, 1 level deeper, how to think about those abatement services, the abatement potential in different categories. What we typically do when we talk about it, we look closer to the core of traditional telcos. That's what we have here. It's a low carbon setup, or replacing virtual connection with replacing physical connections with virtual connections. Like, for example, the Zoom call we do here. I didn't fly to Rome, so I'm avoiding the flight emissions. I'm doing it via video conference call, and that is replacing basically a physical leg with a virtual connection. Significant impact, as you can see here. Low carbon setup, by the way, means simply you are making sure you have energy efficient equipment in use. That was never in focus in the past, but it has to become more and more focused. And then you can continue. You can think about different type of abatement levers. And for the right-hand side here, you need more digital capabilities, digital services, digital solutions. And as you can see, the biggest lever is really in the manufacturing domain, where you reduce your resource consumption by data-driven enabled digital solutions. There is a lot of movement already. Many players are actually quite active in that space. As you can see here, it's just a snapshot, and I don't want to highlight, I didn't want to highlight anyone specifically. It's just amazing to see that many telcos are embracing that already with different type of solutions. And it's pretty clear, our connectivity solutions, our cloud solutions, they all enable these kind of action areas that I was talking about before. And you see here a number of players, but the list is endless, and a lot of activities are going on. I still want to highlight one player a bit, that's AT&T, because they have even developed a very nice homepage where a customer can see all the kind of digital solutions here on the right-hand side, and then get a calculation or estimation for the abatement impact, the customer enablement impact, so to say, of the solution. AT&T has even set their own target, how much they want to achieve in terms of emission reduction. It's a factor of 5 more than the scope 1, scope 2 reduction they have. Factor 10 and a factor 5 in terms of the total scope. So quite ambitious targets. That's a nice illustration basically of what I've called win-win before. It's a clear business stream for AT&T already. It's clearly visible for the customers what they would get out of it in terms of really emission reduction. So having said this, I want to show you how we could actually, and I'm conscious of time, how we would capture that a bit more systematically. What I've done over the last 2 years, I have tried to measure more quantitatively the performance along different dimensions in the telecom industry to make sure that we have a tool that we can use in order to manage against our sustainability ambitions that I have shown before. And the way how I've structured is, I'm measuring 4 dimensions. The fourth one is here the customer enablement that I have been talking about, but the most important one is actually the one here on the right-hand side at the top, the CO2 intensity. That's basically the emission in your own footprint. Then there's a waste component to it as well. And here this commitment to sustainability is what I've mentioned up front, namely the ambition levels that telcos have given themselves. I've worked over the last 2 years on that index. It consists out of 85 quantitative data. I'm normalizing those data against the size and the type of operator, whether it's mobile or fixed, so that I can compare them. And I've taken those players here and profiled them on the basis of their CSR reports, corporate social responsibility reports that they are publishing. The latest one just came out now in April, May. And I've taken those data and profiled those companies. I won't show you now the performance of every single company because that I keep secret and do only share bilaterally, because some players like it, other players don't like it. There are strong performers and weak performers. But what I want to show to you here is the overall outcome. It's a bit of an eye chart, but I think I can explain it quite easily. So what you see here is, first of all, in the first column, the overall score, that's a combination of all 4 sub-dimensions I've explained before. Here's a commitment dimension. So basically, how does a company really commit towards sustainability targets? Do they have an incentive program? Do they link a bonus of the top management to sustainability accomplishments? Yes or no? That's captured here. This here is the third column is basically really the energy intensity and the emissions directly. This here is all about waste, circular economy and waste management. And this here is about customer enablement. And what you see here is the 2 blue curves are the results from last year and this year. You see slight improvement, as you can see here, from 51 to 53. It's overall normalized to 100, only slight improvement. But you see a couple of differences. You see a stronger movement here on the commitment side, and that is clearly visible when you read the press and talk to CEOs. Telcos are focusing more and more on sustainability ambitions, as I explained before, but there's little movement here on the energy intensity side. And that has to do with the fact that we are increasing our energy consumption because of the increased data transport. And we can't compensate enough with energy efficiency measures. We do that by, for example, copper decommissioning or 3G decommissioning. That helps a lot. But we do still little when it comes to really more energy efficient equipment, because it has simply been not part of our decision making so far. There's poor performance on waste management in our industry so far, as you can see here, and also little movement. And there is also the weakest performance actually when it comes to customer enablement. So this business opportunity I was explaining before has not fully arrived yet in the telecom industry. And that's the reason why I'm so grateful for that stage here that I can talk about this. I'm deeply convinced there is, as I explained before, a win-win-win opportunity and much more to do in the industry for us going forward. I'm realizing I'm running out of time. I would like to summarize my messages to you. I really believe that sustainability as part of an ESG concept is a true value driver for any company. Not only because you get better ratings, you motivate your employees, you can realize premiums with consumers, you can really make it a big business, as I indicated before, as AT&T and others, Telia, Deutsche Telekom are trying to do. We have to realize, as I pointed out at the beginning, the ICT telecom sector is really contributing a significant amount of CO2. So even if you do not want to focus on it, we will be forced to do it. Regulators will force us and other stakeholders as well. The entire value chain matters, as I said before. Scope 3 is important and difficult to manage, no question. There is really a need to think about automated solutions that allow us to really measure Scope 3 emissions. I believe every telco operator has to take that very seriously. We are still missing some operators with ambitious targets, but we're getting there. Not engaging sustainability is foolish, is my message. There is clearly a business case, not only a cost business case, but also a top line business case. And there are other benefits, less regulatory risks, more employee retention, etc. I do believe that the index we have developed at BCG, I've developed, is a very good tool to really measure systematically different dimensions, sub-dimensions when it comes to sustainability. So I encourage everyone to look at that index. And last but not least, and that's my main message, I'm deeply convinced that there is a business opportunity that should be embraced, and it's a business opportunity for the good. I have not focused too much on consumers today, but I can also prove that some consumer segments are willing to spend more money for sustainable propositions, green tariffs, refurbished smartphones, etc. But the bigger opportunity is really in the B2B sector, where there is this tremendous business opportunity by selling digital solutions to abate emissions. These are my main messages. I'm grateful for your attention. Thanks for listening. I couldn't really see any reaction in the audience. So I hope you like my messages, and I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you, Roman. We'll take the questions at the end. So we still have 2 use cases of operators ahead of us. We will take a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, think about them, and you can ask them live to the presenters later on. As Roman said, I think it was by circumstances that he actually contributed to sustainability by not being here. He was planning to come. But we're also very happy that Brechtje Sporenberg from KPN is here. And in fact, she came by train from Holland. So she also contributed to the sustainability goals we have ahead of us. So I think we have to pay respect to that. And Brechtje will zoom in on the KPN sustainability story. KPN is always very highly ranked in sustainability indexes. So we're very happy that she will clarify what they're doing, which perhaps others are not doing yet. So thank you, Brechtje.
Welcome. Good morning, all. We are here today, 2 days, to discuss innovation of ecosystems. And what fascinates me very much is that if you look back to the last 10 or 15 years, you can hardly think of even one innovation that does not contain an element of ICT or telecommunications. So I think that we are all working in a very, very relevant sector today, and that we can and also should work on the solutions for the social issues that we face today. Not only social, also the environmental issues. Today I will tell you something about how we managed sustainability within KPN, and also a little bit how we look at the future. Can I have my first slide? Oh, I should do it myself. I see. This one, yeah. Yeah, what we did, I'm a manager of sustainability, and people come often up to me and they say, what is your sustainability strategy? And I say, we don't have one. We do not have a sustainability strategy next to our corporate strategy. We only have a corporate strategy, and everything we do should be sustainable in the strategy, not a separate one. What we see here is a short outline of our strategy. Upper left, the purpose. We go all out to connect everyone in the Netherlands to a sustainable future. So that's the first place where we put sustainability right into the strategy and in our purpose. We have the vision to make the Netherlands the most connected country in the world, and the ambitions to be your preferred partner in digital life. That's what we start from. Then we create value for our stakeholders, and there are many more stakeholders than we see here. But at least those are 3 very important categories. Employees, and we offer the value of employment and employability to our employees, because we know the workforce is evolving, people come and people go, but we make sure that when they leave the company, they can easily find employment outside KPN. So that's also value. Of course, customer value, secure, reliable, and seamless connectivity services. Shareholder value, of course, we have to deliver that as well. And with our services, by acting on the expectations of our stakeholders, we also have a long-term impact on society. And this is all completely combined with our core business. So the secure, future-proof connectivity that we deliver has many advantages. Also, the previous speakers this morning mentioned many aspects that have a social benefit for society in just delivering the connectivity. Then we aim to deliver social and digital inclusion. Digital inclusion means take everyone with you to the future and make sure that even that all targeted groups can actually use your services, also the elderly, people with disabilities, etc. Social inclusion means that even though we have all equipment available these days, people may still feel lonely. So we are also combating loneliness. And then last one, the environmental impact. We see, like also the previous speakers mentioned, that we have a big impact, a big footprint, so that we should bring down the footprint. At the same time, our services can enable our customers to save energy themselves. And we're also very much working on that. In 2008, we started with actually setting goals and creating ambitions. And by doing that, we reached the first real milestone in 2011, which was the first year that we had fully 100% green energy. And from that day on, we started to improve our ambitions. Every time when we achieve a milestone, we talk to a lot of stakeholders to discuss what should be our next ambition. And well, the next ambition was to become climate neutral, which we reached in 2015. And the next one, again, we discussed with many stakeholders, is becoming a circular company. And this one we didn't achieve yet. This is our ambition in 2025, and it's a very big one, actually. A lot has to happen to make this happen. At the same time, you see some also social ambitions that we had. Sometimes we already achieved them, like the 30% gender diversity at board level, and some others are still to come. Also, the 2040 net zero emissions, they were just mentioned by the Boston Consultancy Group, is one of our long-term ambitions, and actually also one that is very difficult to achieve. We have to cooperate very much with other parties to achieve this one. Then, the organizational alignment. How do we manage this? It first starts with intrinsically motivated people in the top. And we were very lucky to have board members who were very intrinsically motivated to move on towards sustainable solutions, even before we saw the concrete business cases. Because we see them today. Boston Consultancy Group just mentioned them and said, well, we see them too. So the Board of Management discusses ESG matters regularly. Every 3 months, I am there to discuss the progress on our ambitions and on our goals. And together, we decide on the future ambitions and also on the KPIs. And when we have decided on those, we publish them in our annual report. So we are completely transparent on what we are steering upon. Then we have CSR people. They are responsible for having and keeping the overview. Keeping the overview what's happening inside the company, but also what's happening outside the company, what's happening in society, and what are the new themes that we should act upon. Actually, this is a very, very small department. Because our philosophy is that the actual work, the actually sustainable operations are done in the business. So the themes, this is done in the business themselves. It should not be something from the headquarters, it should be something from everyone. So managing energy is done in the business. Managing social inclusion, digital inclusion is done by the business. So we define some themes, and on those themes we have special programs. I will come to that later. But we work with dedicated cross-functional teams assigned by the Board of Management on topics like innovation, energy sustainability, and diversity and inclusion. And this works quite well, because only if you bring it to the business, people will really integrate sustainable actions into their daily work. Another thing that we did, and we started with this in 2011, is making ESG an integral part of management remuneration. So we have short-term incentives and long-term incentives, and in both kinds of incentives we included non-financial items. And so far we included the Net Promoter Score and employee engagement in the short-term incentive, and the long-term incentive is based on reputation and circularity. And starting from this year, we will also include the social KPI in the long-term incentive. And together, this works. So we have a responsibility in the board, and from the board, it trickles down through the whole organization. We give people targets and we share our ambitions, and we discuss those ambitions, because actually most ambitions come up from the business. We discuss ambitions together. And in the end, we also make sure that's in the remuneration, so people are also motivated through that direction. As soon as we decided on setting a new ambition, we start looking around us, who shares our ambition. We try to find allies in NGOs, gremiums like ETIS, but also ITU, the Joint Audit Cooperation, ETNO, of course. And we try to find the people or the parties who want to work with us on our ambition, which is also their ambition. And together, for instance, we can also see if we can standardize things. Because if we can standardize matters, then together we can move faster and go further. This is something I can really recommend, because this way it's also very inspiring to talk to the outside world, because it also sharpens your goals. For instance, the net zero target, we first had a target for 2040 in decreasing our CO2 emissions on scope 3. But then when we were talking with all the others, we saw that it should be possible to actually go to net zero. And we have to run faster, we have to do more, but we think it should be feasible, especially if we work together. So that's why we increased our target and set it on net zero since last year as well. And we want to achieve it in 2040, which is very much aligned with some other telecom companies in Europe. Then, as soon as we have a big ambition and we found our partners, we set up a program. Because without a program, you will never get the results in time. And this is just an example about our circular economy program. We aim to achieve about 100% circular operations in our company in 2025, which is actually a big challenge. And when we were thinking about what this actually means, we said the first thing we should do is engage our suppliers, because if they don't work with us, we will never achieve our goal, because they have to produce differently, they have to use new materials, they have to use less energy, less water, etc. So the first thing we did is talking to our suppliers, and we made MOUs with about 18 suppliers in 2 years' time, and they represent about 70% of our total spend on products. So we had the majority of suppliers on board. And then the next step was together to start projects on actually improving everything. And everything, this also affected our internal organization. For instance, you have the code of conduct we had. The next point was the design. Everyone within KPN is touched upon by the circularity program. It involves everyone. And we start, for instance, with the design people, because they have to design differently. They have to think about the product that they want to design, what should it look like, how much energy should it use, can it be made from less material? Can it be made from different material? So they have to design something and define the specs. Next step is the production. Production parties have to see how can we produce it differently than before, like reducing resourcing risk, renewable raw materials, should do product life cycle analysis, and being more efficient in carbon, energy, and waste. So this calls upon the production suppliers mainly. Then we look at distribution. How do we get it from, for instance, China to Europe? Can we use local transportation? Can we use different transportation? Then the consumption side. This is also an interesting part because we here involve our customers and end users. We tell them that we want to be a sustainable company, but we need them too, because we need them to return their equipment to us after use, because we want to recycle it and reuse it. And this is still also very much an ongoing process, because some equipment you can easily get back, but other equipments like mobile phones, people keep them in the drawer. And they don't realize that it's useful to return them to the telecom companies, because the materials inside your mobile phone, they are very valuable. So we are still having programs on this. Then the collection part, how we, also governmental bodies involved here, how we get things back, how we can reuse, refurbish, also with all the privacy related aspects, of course. And then the recycling part itself is managed, and then the circle is more or less around. But you see that we engage very many partners and all our employees, because also things like service and maintenance becomes more important, because when you want to become a circular company, you want to use your materials longer. And this means that all the people who work on service and maintenance, they are very important in keeping things running. And well, together we are actually making steps in becoming a circular company, but we are certainly not there yet. Yeah, then the sustainable effect. I was very happy to see the square that Amy showed us in the beginning. And also, I think we also have a speaker from ELISA coming up. Yes, very good. Because we see many opportunities in the market, but we see in some sectors more opportunities than in others. And the sectors where we see the most opportunities are actually manufacturing and logistics, but I think ELISA will go into more detail about that. Also, both Paul and Amy this morning mentioned the energy sector, and this is a very important one because this is actually coming up and can become very big. We are exploring that one too. But I wanted to mention here healthcare and agriculture. Healthcare, because we see in the Netherlands, and maybe you recognize this in your country, that we have a challenge to keep healthcare scalable, affordable, and accessible for all. We have more people who reach a higher age, which is of course good news, but also they develop more care questions at the last part of their lives. And another challenge that we see in the Netherlands is that we have a labor market issue with finding enough healthcare professionals. So that's where we came in. We made a special KPN health department within the business market. And this health department is dedicated busy with finding solutions to help the healthcare sector. These are both solutions that enable people to live at home longer, but it also is about a secure data exchange, because you can imagine that exchanging healthcare data is much more sensitive than exchanging other data. So that's what we focus on. And what we do, we have actually 4 pillars. We build infrastructure for healthcare. They will build their own healthcare cloud. And what we see is that the pharmacies and the general practitioners and a lot of hospitals are connected in a closed cloud system, so that they can exchange secure data. Then the processes themselves, actually this is the solutions, the domotica solutions also that I mentioned earlier. We help partners with the connectivity for new healthcare solutions. So of course we are not the party that has really knowledge about healthcare itself. So we look for partners who want to work with us, and we can deliver the connectivity. They can deliver the innovative service. So we're also always looking for parties that deliver and invent innovative services for healthcare. And then we partner to make sure that it works. One of the first things that we did was for people with heart rhythm problems. They had to go to the hospital and be admitted there for about 24 hours. But sometimes they go there and nothing happens. So this was not very efficient because they keep a bed, and they don't really need it. And then we, together with some partner, we invented a system that they can just stay at home, and they get a machine, they put it on as soon as the problems start. That makes a recording. The recording is sent to the general practitioner, and he can interpret the data and say, you should go to hospital or not. So this is an example of how we work together to make sure that the hospital can use the beds for people who are actually ill. Now, then the secure data exchange, I already mentioned this one. And care nearby, this means that the people who work in healthcare, we should make work as easy as possible for them. So that when they access, that they need data, they can log in on their iPads or whatever, even if they are not in hospital, but also when they are visiting customers at home. And they can log in anywhere and find the data that they need. That makes their work easier, and it's not so time consuming anymore. So this way, we see that in the healthcare sector, it gives us a lot of opportunities to be really at value for them, and add value for both them and for the patients. Well, actually, this was about my story. And the questions I think we will save for later. Yeah.
After Elisa.
Okay, no problem.
So you already mentioned the Elisa presentation.
Yeah.
Round of applause first for Brechtje, and thanks for clarifying how you got so high in the ranking, and congratulations. So the next speaker unfortunately could not be here neither, not because of COVID this time, but because of plane cancellation. So there are always hiccups in live events, but we're very happy to have Henry again, in this case virtually, so also for a sustainability perspective it's good. But we'll go again through the strategy of Elisa. We've had Henry before in some of our virtual gatherings, but he will now give an update on both topics again of the conference, sustainability on one side and then ecosystem innovation on the other side. Henry, the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Wim, and good morning on my behalf. Is the voice coming through nicely? Hope so. So, yeah, my name is Henri Korpi. I'm responsible at Elisa for what we call international digital services. I give you a glimpse a little bit later on what that actually is. But today, my presentation is basically twofold. As Wim said, first we take a little bit of a look of what Elisa has done on terms of committing and managing towards sustainable future, how we are linking it to our strategy. And I could say that KPN is doing pretty much the similar type of approach that we have, so I don't need to go into that much details in that part of my presentation. Then the second part is maybe a little bit different, which is that I will share with you a couple of examples on how we actually, through our offering, are enabling other organizations, our customers, to address the issues of energy consumption and resource efficiency, and by that helping them to to walk their way towards a more sustainable future. And as Friedrich said, I agree. There are a lot of opportunities in that sector for all the telcos available for capture. But now I'm not being able to change my slide. Okay, so let's start with a few words about Elisa, if somebody doesn't know who we are. So we are a telco operating in Finland and Estonia, established now 140 years ago, this year, 1882. Our revenues are like around 2 billion last year, a little bit more than 5,000 employees operating in kind of basically 3 segments. So consumer customers, the traditional telco stuff for consumers in Finland and Estonia, similarly corporate for B2B customers, and then international digital services, providing network independent digital service solutions for various customer groups outside our telecom scope. So globally, and that is my responsibility area in Elisa nowadays. We have at Elisa put the sustainability and our, let's say, our handprint to kind of a very central piece of our strategy. Already a couple of years ago, we even changed the whole mission of the company to be a sustainable future through digitalization, which kind of in our minds very well presents the thinking that we have, that there are lots of opportunities for us to with our digitalization solutions to help other organizations to become sustainable. We are not forgetting our own footprint. We need to make sure that we are also operating sustainably, not only on the environmental side, but also in other respects too. But we see that there are lots of opportunities for us to help the society as a whole to become more sustainable. And similarly, as KPN, we also have made a selection of we cannot be everywhere. So we have selected a few areas from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that we think that we are able to make a real impact on. And those 4 areas that we've selected are the digital, where we believe that as a telecom operator, we are a key player in our society to make sure that we give people the safe and reliable digital environment, the kind of a basic bone for the whole of their lives, and keep it safe and private, and that is the way that we can contribute to in that sector. Similarly, in social, we want to advance a fair and digitally inclusive society so that everybody can be part of it. The environmental, there we can really make an impact on our customers, how we help them to become more resource efficient side by side with our own operations. And then not to forget the economic sustainability. We want to intensify our own innovation and our partners' innovation in our ecosystems, and with that innovation to drive sustainable value creation in the whole society. And how we have set these things up from the management point of view is a kind of a, we don't see this as a separate thing from what we do every day. It's like we've set ourselves goals both for the footprint and handprint in all of these 4 areas. We have made them public, and we are reporting our progress towards those targets every quarter, side by side with our financial reporting. So we believe that the kind of that there's no need to invent another management mechanism for managing these kind of targets apart from the more traditional business and financial targets. You set targets, and then you work your way towards those targets, and you report your progress, and that is what we believe in. We started our journey towards the broader sustainability with the environmental environmental side. Around 2009, we took the environmental, at that time, responsibility as a central part of our strategy and started thinking what we can do to at that time to reduce our CO2 emissions and also a little bit later CO2 emissions of our customers, and made the similar type of commitments that KPN was talking about, and agree that has been really helpful for us to be able to kind of share views with other people and with those organizations. Then setting those science-based targets for emissions that these are the targets and this is how we measure them and this is our progress. And then we became a carbon neutral a couple of years ago, and from that kind of a learning path we have now set ourselves to path to be a provider of a little bit broader sustainability or sustainable development in those 4 areas, one of which still continues to be the environmental part. For us, the means of contributing to the sustainable development is digitalization, and especially digitalization of operations. And that has become a core competence of Elisa now during the little bit more than a decade of us automating basically everything that can be automated in our own production environment. Starting originally from the operations part and then gradually moving to other processes in the network. And now we are in a situation where 2015 the last human left our network operating center. So for the past 7 years we have had no people in there, and most of the other processes are also totally run by computers. So this continued investment and development into our capability of running our own operation digitally based on data has created Elisa kind of unique capabilities that we are now then utilizing to help others to do the same and to become more energy efficient or resource efficient. And now I move to sharing you with a couple of examples of how we actually do it in my own kind of responsibility area in international digital services, and start with Elisa Polystar, which is our software business that is productizing the same innovations that we have developed over time for our own networks to be sold to other telcos. To help them to walk the same path towards fully automated network operations. We're now serving a little bit more than 120 telcos around the world, and the case that I wanted to share with you here is a feature of our automation engine product. We call it Intelligent Energy Saver, which is a kind of a model example of how we think that the kind of real digitalization of operations happens. The outcomes of that solution in our own networks and in our customer networks is that we can save up average of 14% of radio access networks energy consumption with no effect to actual end user experience, and do that purely by applying data gathering, analytics, and automation on top of these systems that the network equipment vendors are providing. So basically using the systems that are provided by the network equipment vendors more efficiently and more optimally for energy consumption. And how it actually works is a kind of model example of how we think this digitalization of operations should be done. So there is a lot of data that is gathered from various systems, in this case regarding customer experience, regarding the infrastructure, and all that over time. What has happened on an hourly basis, daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, and what have been the settings in which time and what has happened, and we feed all that information into the analytics, and that gives out actions, how to configure or change, adjust the power saving configurations in different base stations, in different frequency layers and so forth, in different technologies, to get the optimal results from the point of view that the customer experience is not affected, and the electricity is consumed as low amount as possible. And then that information is fed back to the learning loop, and it closes the loop so that it works automatically 24/7 every day, and becomes gradually better and better in managing the electricity consumption. And it's a kind of a model example of how we approach things. The other example I wanted to show you is from the manufacturing side. We have a software business, we call it ELISA Industry, which is providing pretty much the same or similar software as we are providing to other telcos, but in this time to certain manufacturing verticals for high tech like semiconductor and electronics, food and beverage, certain process industries like battery production, who share the same characteristics from the data point of view than a telecom network. So there is a lot of phases in the production, and there is a lot of transactional data created during the production, so that data can be extracted and turned into insights and then turned into actions. And here, the example that I wanted to share with you is from semiconductor manufacturing. That semiconductor manufacturing is a kind of it's a very demanding manufacturing process which the creation of a chip can take from several weeks to even several months, depending on how many thousands of layers there are to be printed on that silicon wafer during that manufacturing process. And each time the new layer is being printed on a wafer, there is a set of measurements taken from the wafer to make sure that the printing was okay, and before it continues to the next phase of production. And the yields are not very good. The customers don't want us to comment them publicly, but you would be surprised how much of those wafers go to waste. And by applying the very similar type of a methodology, so to taking the measurements of that individual layer and combining it with the millions of other measurements information from the historians, and then running advanced analytics on that huge amount of raw data, we've been able to, with our customers, to decrease the standstill time between the making the decision on whether or not to scrap the chip or the wafer, or whether to continue the production, and with what kind of parameters. We've been able to reduce that time to 6 on average of what it used to be before, and you can only think what that means for the production of those microprocessors that are on demand nowadays, as we all know, and at the same time the amount of wafers that need to be kind of wasted, taken out of the process, has decreased dramatically because of the more accurate decision making. So here we help our customers not only to kind of produce more, but at the same time save a lot of energy, a lot of time, and a lot of materials, very expensive materials, in not going to waste, just purely applying our ability to kind of make good recommendations for actions based on the analytics driven from the data. Exactly the same stuff as we are doing for telcos, for example, in that energy area. So these were the examples that I wanted to share with you, and if I want to leave you with a couple of takeaways from this this presentation, the first would be that the sustainability is in our mind it is not nothing more different from managing other types of targets. Companies have profitability targets, they have revenue targets, and they nowadays have also sustainability targets. You just have to select wisely where you can make the contribution, commit to targets, and then start working your way towards those targets using the management mechanisms that you have already on place. And the second takeaway would then be that all the telcos have different core competencies. For Elisa, it has the capabilities in digitalizing operational tasks. But for us all, they are different. But there are a lot of opportunities for telcos to help their customers to become much more energy and resource efficient by applying those core competencies into the processes. So those two takeaways.
Okay, thank you, Henry. Congratulations with the ecosystem innovation you're already doing, like in manufacturing. We'll discuss that further also in the working groups. I would now like to ask the speakers who are here to come on stage and have a seat. We would like to have your view. I think you had a lot of food for thought, and all of this will be discussed the 2 coming days in the 13 working groups which are meeting today and tomorrow, and we'll discuss it from technical, privacy, security, and many other angles. But I think it would be good now to see whether there are questions triggered by all the information you got so far. It's only 2 hours from, I don't know, many hour event. But so I'm sure you agree, you disagree that we can turn challenges into opportunities as a telco. I think we have a question.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all these presentations. Jesper Broekhoff, KPN, so a proud colleague of Brechtje and Paul. Well, I think we heard quite a couple of different lenses, perspectives, from which we can look at the broad transition we have to do. And in this perspective, most of the lenses are focusing on growth, sustainable growth in particular. And maybe I want to add one lens for all the participants to the conference the next couple of days. And I think Boston Group mentioned it shortly, that becoming net neutral, net zero in 2040 isn't good enough, because we need to get rid of a lot of emissions which are already there. So I think the real challenge for the telco sector is not to become net zero itself, but to enable to become for business and the world to become net negative. So the question, and maybe I'm going to ask it to Mike or to the Boston Group, is during the working groups in the upcoming days, how can we add, or maybe it's already in it, add this lens to the challenge we all have in the upcoming decade?
Mike, you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you.
Perhaps Roman?
Yeah, very nice observation and good question. Yeah, I think from what we've seen here as well today is it's about collaboration. It's about bringing together stakeholders, getting out of your own walled garden as an industry, making collaboration happen, managing the tensions between the conflicting goals and outcomes, finding ways to solve those issues, meet around a common challenge, commit to that challenge, find ways to drive that forward as a collective, really. And that is a bit of a preview to the workshop this afternoon, but it's really about that. It's about making that commitment to mutual stakeholder agreements and finding ways to get over the challenges that will inevitably emerge from that.
Okay, Roman, you want to give your...
You can hear me. So I like that remark very much. And as a matter of fact, there are players already out there who have taken on the challenge to wipe out historic emissions. Microsoft is one of the ICT players who have stated that explicitly. So they realize it's not good enough to work on their own footprint, but rather to take on the kind of historic emission footprint, so to say. Having said this, I have, as I said before, I've now looked in detail into the kind of emission pattern of telecom operators and ICT players. There are quite a number of players that have worsened their footprint over the last year. Despite all the commitments, despite all the public attention that we are getting, there are players who are doing worse, and that has a bit to do with the fact that we are digitizing our world more and more. Unless we really change the way how we operate, and Henry made it really very nicely clear in my eyes that there is a need to structurally change the way of operations, we won't get there. And then it won't be fair to talk about customer enablement or scope 4 emissions and wipe out historic emissions, because then we have not even worked on our own footprint. My concern currently is that this is too much lip service from some players. And they focus on the business opportunity, and they are not doing enough to really structurally change the way how they operate, to automate, to digitize, to select suppliers in the right way, to make sure that the products and services we develop are really more sustainable. There is still a lot of homework to do. So one step after the other is my pledge a bit, while not losing out of sight the historic mission that we have to wipe out our emissions from the past.
Thank you so much. I would like to add a little bit to what Roman is saying on the enablement front, is also that if telecoms operators want to be credible enablers, they have to be honest about how they are calculating that enablement cost. If you look at the way telecoms operators are reporting enablement now, for example, remote connectivity and conferencing, or, they're claiming value or carbon footprint reductions from dematerialization, which is using Netflix instead of DVDs, or things like that. That is, how are they calculating that? Is that really a credible way to say that you are impacting on your customers' emissions? So I think just to be really transparent and honest, and don't try and claim something that you are not making an impact on. And when you are helping your customers, say, how am I calculating this? How did I come to this calculation, and what proportion of that can I credibly claim as a telecoms operator, and what has been done by the rest of the community delivering this service?
Somebody else wants to comment or add?
It's exactly about what you are saying. That's why we do not publish scope 4 emissions as scope 4 emissions in our annual report, because this is a lot of discussion with the accountant, because of this. What can you really attribute to you? What's your accomplishment? But at the same time, we have to continue and move forward and do our best.
Okay, I'm sure we'll discuss that further on. Any other questions? I'm sure there is one more before we have the coffee break. I think there is a hostess coming.
Hi, this is Ian Sorek from MC Systems. Thank you very much for the presentation this morning. It's very interesting. My question is for you from KPN and also for Ramon. Is it there a conflict of interest between our desire to increase, for example, a phone trade-in and also usage, who is growing dramatically, the cost of call centers and the cost of the data centers or hosting all of these informations on one side. On the other side, there's only 1% of phone trade-in. So isn't there an inherent conflict of interest there?
I'm not sure what do you mean with the phone trade-in, the recycling of phones, or?
Yeah, the recycling of the phones is only 1%. We want on one side to encourage the clients to recycle, and they're not doing it. And if they recycle, we are causing a different kind of problem. So there are kinds of conflicts there. And the second one, of course, is the usage. Usage is growing dramatically. This is a scope 4 thing. We want them to use the network on one side. On the other side, when they're using the network, they're encouraging data centers to grow dramatically, and there are over 8,000 already. Yeah. And the power consumption, everything there is growing. So how do we make the profits from the telco side, but still encourage saving on the usage and saving on the recycling side?
Customers to use our services. At the same time, we stimulate them to for instance, in our TV equipment, we have a green energy saving mode. We stimulate them to put it on. We stimulate them to recycle. Of course, we also want them to use, and we also, at the same time, we have data centers. We have only a limited amount of data centers left because we sold the majority. But the ones that we have, we are working on making sure that they function as sustainable as possible by putting a lot of data in the deep sleep mode, etc. Because we know that actually every time you send an email, you duplicate because it's in your email and it's also in the recipient's email. And this way, the amount of data that's stored in the data centers is booming. So we have to make sure that the way we store it requires as less energy as possible. So we are innovating on that part in order to store things. We do not, and actually we also sometimes we pay attention to our customers that they should clean their emails, and to create the awareness that you have a big data footprint. Every one of us has a very big data footprint. People are not aware of this, but it's really worthwhile to clean it, to just remove big data systems. But we can improve on this one, I must admit. We can do more.
That's a very good tip, I think.
Maybe I can add to that from a more network perspective, because the paradox you mentioned is there. There's data growth. Data grows 20%, sometimes in the mobile area, it's even 50% per year. Yeah, and data growth comes with more capacity, and more capacity comes with more energy utilization. So it's our challenge, together with the vendors, to ensure that the new technology we put in place is more efficient. And that's how we try to catch up on that. But that's clearly a challenge. Yeah. That's one part of it. By replacing our mobile network, we were able to actually avoid energy increase usage in our mobile network, despite the 20% on-year growth. But I do like the other remark that was made earlier on, that it's also about our own operations. So it's not just the technology, it's the technology we're using, the AI we're using to make that operations much more efficient. And I think if we do both, then we're able to meet that challenge. And clearly there's a paradox, because we are relying on our customers using our network, and the more they use our network, the more the more we earn. And that's an interesting balance we have to see.
Yeah, I think Roman wants to say something.
Yeah,
perhaps short.
I want to add to this very important discussion. I have to say that is a debate we had over the last couple of years, but we can prove in the meantime that this rebound effect, that's basically it, right? We are using more and more our services, and of course, with more consumption comes more energy consumption. However, we can prove, if we do it well, that the rebound effect is positive in that sense, that the balance of energy usage or emissions as a consequence is really beneficial. We call it breaking the energy curve. That's basically it. That goes along with the way how we organize our value chain. Again, I'm making reference to Elisa. Elisa has shown that nicely. We can basically transport a gigabyte for less energy, less and less energy, even more than we do today. We can really have a positive balance when we really structurally change the way how we operate the value chain. That's the first remark I want to make. And the first question about the trade-ins, that's also a common problem we are facing for the last couple of years, because we have tried to do forward trade-ins in the industry quite a lot, or trade-ins in general. And you're right, the question out of the audience is right, there is very little trade-in. However, we see also the way how we can improve it. We need to change the commercial model behind our smartphones that we are subsidizing and giving away for free. if we turn towards a leased model, we can increase the incentive to really bring back the device. And that's working in many, many examples. The point I want to make is there are really known problems, well understood problems, but there are ways to really answer them. We can break the energy curve in our industry. We can do that also in the way how we use our services. And there are studies out there that can prove it's positive, the balance. A nice study from A1, by the way, A1 group. And we can also manage on the return cycles, number of devices that are coming back, increase dramatically. We are, by the way, at 3% currently, but there is clear momentum that we can go much, much higher.
Okay, thank you, Roman. I think we have to conclude the Q&A here, but we're here for another almost 2 full days, so we can continue the discussion in the 13 working groups. And we will also close here the streaming, so for the people who are watching us, thanks for watching the live streaming. Check out our website and hope to see you physically next year when we have another gathering.